Hi everyone, my name's Mary. I'm a human resources consultant with over 20 years of experience in the HR profession. I've worked with small businesses through to larger corporations. Through my experience, I've realised that a lot of small to medium sized businesses don't have the finances or really the need to have a dedicated HR professional. And that's what a lot of these workshops are directed at. So if you're a small business, this workshop's going to cover taking care of your HR. So what are we going to cover? HR basics to support your strategic planning, recruitment and retention, positive onboarding experience, and performance management and reviews. So the first point in HR management is workforce planning. So to be able to plan your workforce, you need to have an idea and a good understanding of what your business is trying to achieve. So what is the service you're going to provide? What is the product you're going to provide? And what skills do you need to be able to provide those services or products? And how many skills? So you need to look at if you want 3 customer service people, 4 sales people, or whether it's a manufacturing business. So that's what the workforce planning stage is about, is identifying what you're trying to achieve in your business and then how you engage the human resources to be able to deliver that. So the next stage then, of course, is recruitment. So once you know how many employees you need, what the skills are that you need to recruit to, that's when you need to go out looking for those people to recruit and hire into your business. Once you've found suitable people, we start the onboarding process. And onboarding is really important because it makes sure that you have a really good first impression. So from day one, new employees feel welcomed, they feel like they're already a valuable part of the team. Throughout the time of an employee's experience, performance management or a performance review process makes sure that there's regular touch points through the employment relationship so that you can identify things such as a career plan that an employee might have. So this then leads into your succession plan. So if you have either an aging workforce or people that you know are going to move on to another role, you've got already identified employees that you know can step into those roles and have a career progression. So looking at things like your skills gap analysis. So what skills do employees need versus what they have, to then identify the training and performance support that you can provide to them, which of course ties into compensation and benefits. So what sort of salary are certain positions worth or should be paid in the business? So the basic HR strategic and HR planning. These two areas align HR strategies with the business plan for sustainable growth. So the HR basics, it doesn't matter what size business you have, the very minimum requirements would be employment contracts, because these set out all of the details of the employment. Is it full-time permanent, part-time permanent, are they a casual employee, or are they on a fixed term contract? And that all depends on the needs of the business. But it does need to be stated in the employment contract because it is a legal document. Position descriptions. So position descriptions outline all of the responsibilities and tasks that a certain role will carry out. And position descriptions are important for a number of reasons. So the first one being just so that the employee knows what they're required to do, what their responsibilities are. But they're also, in an instance of performance management, and you feel that an employee is underperforming, it's the position description that you come back to highlight what their responsibilities are and which areas they need to improve on. So, like any documents in a business, your HR documentation provides, first of all, support and information so that everyone knows what's meant to happen, but they also then support any processes. Often there's employees, a lot of businesses say, it's very difficult, you can't sack anyone these days. Well, this is where a lot of the basic HR documentation, as long as you have it in place and you can demonstrate that an employee has signed off on the position, they understand their responsibilities, and they're not carrying out those responsibilities, all of these documents also support a business if they happen to go through a disciplinary process. And so that moves into HR policies and procedures. So basic HR policies and procedures such as a code of conduct, recruitment policy, leave policy, they all support the business in making decisions of what an employee can and can't do. And in an incident where there's a complaint, the HR policies and procedures are what are there to support the business. And continual improvement, of course, covers areas like constant review of those processes. So reviewing employment contracts, keeping up to date with legislative changes to make sure that everything is in line and current. So strategic HR planning, the organisation's goals, objectives and values. So this area is always taken from the business plan. So when a business sets out what it wants to achieve and its objectives and values, we then need to take the next step of what are the requirements. So like we said before, what are the skill sets and the numbers of those skill sets that are needed for a business to perform the way they want to. Once those skill sets and numbers are identified, we look at the availability. Is there local availability? Are these roles needed to be carried out on site? Can they be operated remotely? All of these things need to be considered to strategically plan for your HR. So assessment of human resources, needs versus availability. So we need to look at the gap analysis. What skills are on hand? What skills do we need to go further afield for to recruit? So that's the action planning stage. What are we going to do? Do we look further afield? Do we approach universities? Are there apprenticeships we might be able to engage? And then, of course, the implementation stage to make it all happen. The life cycle of employees starts, of course, at your recruitment. So you've advertised a position, whether that's on Seek or whether it's locally or through job active agencies. Conduct interviews, not just to get the merit-based process of who has the skills you need for the job, but you also want to make sure that an employee is the right fit for your business. You then make the selection for the employees. Once you decide to make a job offer and move on to onboarding, you need to look at how you get the employee started. So the conditions of their employment are often, they'll be covered in the employment contract and the position description. So these documents set the expectation for the conditions of employment. Once the employee starts, we look at how we make sure ensuring with and comply with laws, employee development and progression to suit future business needs. So like we've said on the previous slide, identifying skills and succession planning so that the business doesn't have any staff turnover. Staff turnover and recruitment is a very expensive process, so the longer we can retain an employee, the better for the business. Eventually with employees, there'll come a time when employment is ending, whether that's because they've retired, moved on to another position. So we need to make sure that you're looking at the proper legislation to make sure that there aren't unfair dismissal claims. If an employee's employment needs to be terminated, we need to make sure that you're doing that in line with legislation so that there's been proper conversations had and a process followed to do that. So going back to talent acquisition and recruitment, so developing effective recruitment and retention strategies to attract and retain top talent that aligns with the organisation's vision and values. So like we've said, you need to look at the culture of the organisation, the values and goals. So where would we find those people? Where do you make relationships with? Is it TAFEs? Is it apprenticeship organisations? To look at the best way to attract the right talent. So what is it that we need somebody to do that isn't currently being done in another role or shared with another role? So conduct the job analysis. Is this a standalone role? Will it be put with other responsibilities and duties? Is it part-time, full-time, casual, or a fixed-term contract? Develop the job description and job specifications. What is it exactly that we want this position to complete? And then, of course, regular review, so maintaining and updating the job description and job specifications. This ensures the process of continual improvement and staying current with the needs of the business and responsibilities of the position. The employment contract. So what information do you need to provide when making an offer of employment? The employment contract sets out the conditions of the employment and type of employment. So is it full-time, part-time, casual? Is there an award that's relevant to the position? Or is there an enterprise agreement? Or is it award-free? What's the title of the position? The start date of the role? And if it's a fixed-term contract, the end date should also be included. Is there a probationary period? So generally, there's a 6-month probationary period for all positions. With small businesses, however, that is a business that has 14 or less employees, that probationary period is 12 months. That allows for small businesses to have a greater amount of time to really examine whether an employee is the right fit for the business and if they want to continue their employment. The employment contract also has to state what the reporting lines are, so who does the position report to? And this should state the title of that position, not the name of the manager, as this could change. So why do we need the employment contract? Because it sets out the tone of the employment and allows for better management. Job information. What job-specific information do you need to provide? The position description or job description covers off the duties and responsibilities of the role. So it sets out general things like being available to screen phone calls, organising someone's diary, engaging with community. It lists all those general responsibilities and expectations as to how that will occur. So basically, the job position assists in the understanding of duties and responsibility. It can also be used to support a performance management process. So in an instance where an employer feels that an employee is not performing as they would like, they can use the position description to support that discussion and point back to that document that details what's required of the role. Fair work requirements. So currently the National Employment Standards, they underscore all other legislation. They set the minimum employment standards. So say for 4 weeks annual leave, you can't put in an employee's contract that they have 3 weeks annual leave. The employment conditions that you offer need to meet these minimum standards, and they do need to be provided to all employees with their employment contract. Once you've engaged someone, they've returned their employment contract, you know what date they're due to start, you need to make sure they have a positive onboarding experience. This ensures that the employee receives a positive employment experience from day one. The benefits of effective onboarding are a boost in motivation. They feel like they're part of a team right from the start. Ensure they have all the tools needed to do their job. We've all been to roles where we start the job and the computer hasn't arrived yet for us to really undertake our responsibilities. It doesn't make an employee feel very welcome when that happens. Make sure the employee has a clear understanding of systems and processes. It sets the right experience for performance management. And it also helps them build connections with peers and business units. So what are the key elements of onboarding? Initially, we need to make sure that the new employee is familiar with the company profile. This may have been covered during the interview process. However, ensure the employee has a good understanding of the company's values and goals. Make sure that workplace policies such as the Code of Conduct and the Work Health Safety Policy are understood and have been signed by the employee. Make sure the employee is provided with the HR handbook and point out the key points for them to be familiar with. Ensure there's a training schedule for activities to be completed as part of their onboarding. This may be a simple process that's completed in one day, or for larger businesses, it can be done over several months. Ensure that new employees are introduced to the team. In some instances, they may not remember everybody's name if it's a larger organisation, but it still makes sure that even the current workforce knows that there's a new team member started and what their role is. Emergency welfare. One of the priorities of onboarding is to ensure that the work health safety induction is carried out so that employees are familiar with the evacuation plan, first aid officers, and any EAP provider that the business might have. Over the period of time in the following week, the company will just further make sure that the employee does have an understanding of the profile, they've been able to allocate or locate any of the workplace policies they need, and that they're developing a better understanding of the office rules and processes. The training schedule for onboarding might still be being carried out, but this should almost be complete. And of course, further down the track, by the third month, we're trying to really understand if the employee is the right fit for the business and if this is an employee we want to continue with. Keeping in mind that the probationary period is still current at this stage. So whether they're on probation for a 6-month or a 12-month period, now is the time to be thinking, if the employee isn't quite meeting expectations, what should the business do? Do they need to provide coaching or mentoring? But at this point, it's time to be having some conversations about the future of that employee with the business. So supervision and training. This ties in with setting expectations. Does the employee need guidance? Do they need supervision? So in the case of apprentices, do they need to have a higher level of qualified person supervise their work? Do they need upskilling or additional training? A positive and effective method of ensuring new employees are onboarded as desired is to have at least monthly performance discussions with them to review those points. Record keeping. So what's included in employee records? There's different types of employee records. From general employment records, this includes your employment contract, any sort of personal information details so that you have contact details for next of kin. It would be bank details, anything that that person needs to get started in a role. Hours of work and timesheets so that they can fill them out. Payroll information. Leave and accrued leave and leave taken balances. Details of superannuation contribution payments. And any end of employment or termination information. And this has to be kept for 7 years. Performance management and reviews. So establishing performance management systems that provide ongoing feedback, coaching and development opportunities to enhance employee performance and engagement. So we look at, is the employee meeting all of the requirements of the role in their current role? Has the role evolved into more responsibility, or is the current role still meeting the needs of the business? Because a part of that performance review process is about looking at the position description and making sure that it is in line and is current with the work that's being carried out or the work that needs to be integrated into a position. If the role has expanded, has it developed in such a way as to warrant an increase in salary due to added responsibility? Or has the employee expressed an interest in growing their career with the business? If so, is there any training that's been identified which would support the development of the employee to better meet the current and future needs of the business? So what have we covered? We've just spoken about the HR basics to support strategic planning, recruitment and retention, how to create a positive onboarding experience, and performance management and reviews. Does anybody have any questions about any of those topics?
Thank you, Mary. That's awesome presentation, very useful insight. I guess a question that comes into my mind in terms of what part of this process can be at a cost to a business versus how much of it can be created internally so then it's repeatable and it doesn't have to cost, especially with the onboarding. Does it have to be a costly experience for a business? And what can they do to make it part of their day to day and everybody's involved in that process?
Thanks, Lena. Look, it doesn't have to be a costly process to the business. I think the first part is just implementing the process. So that can need a bit of development. So there can be checklists and documents that you work through to make sure that, say, a new employee, some of the important policies that you would want them to be familiar with are the code of conduct, work health safety policy, maybe a privacy policy. But once you've got those checklists in place and the processes to go through of what are the priorities, so they might go to have their HR induction first. Then the next step in the onboarding process could be a work health safety induction and then maybe an IT induction. So part of the onboarding process can be captured in a procedure document. And once that's in place, it doesn't have to be an expensive process at all.
And just a follow-up question, part of the onboarding. Obviously, every workplace have a number of policies that they have to share with new employees, which can be overwhelming because there's a number of them. Should the employer just be assured that the candidates or the recruits have actually gone through them and they tick that box in the HR system, or does more need to be done because of the risk of not actually understanding the policies and the consequences of not following them? Do we take it to another level in terms of ensuring that they did actually understand the policies, or do we just trust that they've read it and we're all good?
I would always recommend that as part of the different department inductions, that they actually review those policies, the primary policies, with a new employee. So, say the HR department would go over the code of conduct policy, say the bullying and harassment policy, the reporting complaints policy, so that they can discuss them with the employee and make sure that they understand the policy and understand the repercussions or the consequences of not abiding by that policy. And then the other departments in the business, whether it's IT and the use of internet and social media and work health safety, covering off how they report an incident and where evacuation areas are, all of those departments that have those key policies need to make sure that they go over them individually with the new employee to make sure that they do understand and sign off on them as they go through them.
So, Mary, in terms of, you've talked about the new employees and the workplace policies are so important for every employee. How do you encourage businesses to keep the workplace policies top of mind for everybody? So it's not just the new employees.
Look, as part of the continual improvement process for the business, there should be a schedule, which isn't normally done by HR, but through quality control, would decide at what frequency different policies are reviewed to make sure that they're still current and compliant. So it's a good idea if that schedule can be staggered so that as those policies and review and processes are reviewed, they can be circulated to the current team across the organisation so that everyone's aware. We've just completed the annual review of the bullying and harassment policy. Please have a read of it. It's been updated and familiarise yourself with it. So it's about making sure that there's not 20 policies thrown at them all at once, but that they're aware that they're constantly being reviewed and that they need to keep on top of them. And I think communicating to employees that Policies and procedures are actually there to protect them. They're not, some people can feel a bit weighed down by them and that it's a box ticking exercise. But I think if the culture of the organisation is that, this complaints policy, if you have an incident at work that you want to approach management about, here's the process that helps you be able to do that without having to maybe speak to somebody if you're not comfortable about that initially. So making sure that the business in a whole has a positive attitude towards policies and procedures and understands the reason for them.
And just one other question. In terms of, if I'm just a small business, I've only got 5 employees, do I really need to have these workplace policies?
For small businesses, all of the policies still support you. So as a small business owner, sometimes you can have more challenges even than a larger organisation, but that's because the larger organisations have the policies and procedures. And it's very common for small businesses to think, well, I've only got 2 employees, I don't need to worry about that. But small businesses are often, for that reason, the ones that do have trouble, or they're the ones that approach needing support to performance manage an employee because they don't know the proper process, or they go ahead and do something that's incorrect and find themselves in trouble with the Fair Work Ombudsman. A small business with very few employees, you still need to have those policies, and they don't have to be an 8-page document. They can be very basic in very simple language that just ticks off the areas of risk for you to make sure that you're protected.
I have one last question. The recruitment process can be expensive because you're paying for advertising the role, and I think a lot of companies, they spend a lot of time to, scan through the CVs, doing the phone scanning and the interviews. It's time and money, and some offer sign-on bonus just to get people to sort of accept the offer. So there is a lot involved in terms of cost. I guess at what point the investment in building the right culture and having positive onboarding would play in an advantage for an employer, whereby it reduces your recruitment costs because people will just come to you because of your reputation. So I think this is the balance between investing internally to then save cost and recruitment. What can employers consider in terms of long-term investment to ensure they save on recruitment costs?
You're spot on with it being an expensive process, and it's just not just the recruitment process itself. Some data would indicate that it actually takes 2 years for a new employee to be fully functional in their role. And so for anyone who's not carrying out the full requirements of the role, that's an ongoing cost to a business as well that goes past the recruitment process. So the performance review process, I'm a big believer in that being a key process for a business, whether it's a small, medium or large size business, because it makes the employee first of all know that their work's been acknowledged, recognised, that they're seen and engaged by their employer on a one-to-one basis. But it also allows them to see that, well, they've got a career aspiration. So a lot of the reason that people move to another job is for a promotion. So if an employee can see that within a business they've got the opportunity to undertake further training, to upskill, that there's a career path within the business, that performance management or performance review process helps them see that they have a future in the business, and that supports retaining them so that they don't have to move off to another business for their career. Okay, so thank you for your time. So at the Business Solutions Hub, we have personal support for HR, workplace relations and business specialists. We have on the platform a library of over 170 HR and business resources to help you manage your business. And we also provide regular HR and WR updates to help keep your business compliant. So if you'd like any more information, please come and see me after the presentation. Thank you.